Hello, my name is Dejan Bochkov, Grandmaster from Bulgaria. Today we continue our series on the opposite colored bishops. And today we would like to see how are they cooperating with rooks, with some other heavy pieces. The first thing that you need to know about these endgames is that they usually provide better winning chances to the side which has the advantage. And the reason for that is, okay, there are many reasons, but the main one is that usually the rook and the bishop are a good couple and they can cooperate their efforts against an object in the opponent's camp, which is standing on the color of the bishop. And the opponent's bishop cannot adequately defend the attacked weakness because it is having the other color. So basically, whenever we attack the opponent, we have one extra piece in the attack. That's one thing. Another thing is that we have some additional winning ideas like sacrificing the exchange for the bishop, or we can also sacrifice a piece in most of the cases. In some cases, sorry. So in most of the cases, the side which has the initiative has it for a very long time and has very good winning chances. The first sample that I would like to show you is the game Keres against Perk. And Keres is improving his position with the move g4. As you can see that at the moment white is having more active rook and more active bishop. These are the only advantages that he has. The position is pretty symmetrical, and I know people who would agree a draw in this situation, but that would be a mistake because white has very good winning chances, and most likely black's defense is very tough. So what white wants to do is simply to improve his position on the king's flank. He wants to push his pawns all the way up to h5, f5, bring the king here on g4 to help. And once that these pawns are coming on the fifth rank, he wants to take on g6. And there is nothing that black can do to stop this plan. He is doomed to passive defense. So he played h6. h4 was the reply by Keres. His plan is, like I told you, very straightforward. He's just advancing the pawns. And he played now king g3. Next, he wants to play f4. And he wants to insert one more piece into the attack. This is going to be the king, and after that, the pawn. It doesn't really matter how black is going to defend. If the king stays on the 8 or on the 7th rank, there is going to be pin either on the diagonal or this file, the 7th rank. And whenever the pawn is coming on g6, white is going to win a pawn. But this is not the end of it. You will see that there is something more that he can do. So after king g7, Keres played f4, and Perk replied with bishop e3, so he's trying to trade as many pawns as possible. The other possible move was king f6, when king f3 will probably lead to the same thing. Bishop e3 was answered f takes g5, bishop g5, and naturally white wants to kick away this bishop from the good defensive position. He goes king f3 and king f4. King f3 had the idea of king e4 and king f5. Now he can also do it from the f4 square. Black replied with king g6. He's trying to hold the 6th rank. The other attempt was king f6, to which most likely white would have played the move a4, playing for Zugzwang. When the game can continue king g6, check, and a move like king g7 will probably lead to the text, to the actual game with king f5 and rook f7 followed by g5 and g6. While if black wants to defend with a move like f6, white will play bishop d3 check, giving black very tough choice, very unpleasant choice, and most likely black is just losing in this situation, because if he goes on the 7th rank, then there is a check. He cannot cover his king as the bishop is hanging. And if the king goes back on the 8th rank, white is simply playing bishop c4 with the plan of bringing the king to g6 and to h6 and to deliver checkmate on h7. There is no adequate defense against this plan. As you can see, the bishop is completely hopeless case in this particular situation. It cannot defend a single light square. That's a very usual picture in these endgames. And if the king goes on h6 instead of going on the 7th rank, then rook d7 is again very unpleasant The threat is checkmate in 1. Rook h8 would be answered simply b3, and black is in Zugzwang. He doesn't have a move at the moment, so sooner or later he will have to part with the f-pawn, and then little by little white will keep on improving his position. He will speculate with the mating threats. And there is also an additional plan of bringing the king to the queen's flank and to sacrifice the exchange and to take all the pawns to win this endgame. So there are 2 winning plans. He has a choice which one to use in the game. So therefore, king f6 doesn't help. Let's see if king g6 does. White is giving a check. And once again, he's polling the coordination of the black pieces. In the game, black played king g7. King h6 is still an option, to which king f5 would be the reply. And after f6, white is just moving back with the king on f4. And that's a position which we have already studied. Rook h8, we said that there will be a4 or bishop f5. There are various ways of achieving Zugzwang position. The bishop is not getting anywhere. The rook has to guard the h7 square, so black is just losing. And if black sacrifices a pawn with the move f5, then after bishop takes f5, once again we have this position which is very close to 1 for the first player. Mating threats, weak pawns, bad king, and an extra pass pawn on the g file. This should be winnable for white. So king g7, king f5. Keres achieved what he wanted to. The king is now active. The pawn will jump over g5 and then it will reach the g6 square. Okay, black is going to lose the f7 pawn, but isn't that going to be still a draw? Most of you might be wondering. It won't be, because there are some mating threats which are coming after that. If black tries to activate himself with a move like rook e8, now white is going to reply with g5, and then bishop is coming on c4. Once again, we're reaching a position of Zugzwang. This bishop is not going anywhere. This rook is not going anywhere. The pawns are also fixed. And if the king moves, well, it's not quite obvious where exactly is this king moving to. King g8, there will be g6. And if king f8, simply rook somewhere away with the threat of bishop b5 on the next move, and to take this bishop on e7. And finally, the game saw king h6, bishop to c4, king g7, g5, and g6. And black resigned. The reason for that was the following line. If king g7, white is going to take on f7, not with the rook. He needs the rook. He wants to take with the pawn. Now that pawn is a potential queen, or, well, there are also some tactical resources based on the advance of that pawn. For instance, if black goes rook h8, you can pause the videos and you can find what was the resource that white has to win the game. It's a simple one. He's just promoting the pawn with a check, forces black to take with the king, and then he wins the bishop. And if black defends with a move like a4, then the winning plan is going to be to bring the rook, first of all, on the 6th rank, to give a check, to force the king to go on the h file, now to force the bishop to defend the rook, and then the decisive maneuver comes king g5, followed by king h5, and checkmate on d3. Or immediately bishop d3 checkmate. And there is nothing that black can do to stop it. As you can see, the attack is conducted on the light squares, and there is nothing that black can do to prevent this checkmate on the light squares. And the second sample that I would like to show you is the game Tau with the white pieces against Yusupov. As you can see, the great player is in big trouble at the moment. The rook is the only active piece that he has. His bishop is obstructed by his own pawns, and the king is cut by the enemy rook. All of this is enough for the second player to win the game. And the thing that Yusupov needs to do, the only thing that he needs to do is to bring this king somewhere close to the enemy king and to checkmate it. After that, he would be attacking with everything that he has, with the rook, with the bishop, and that would be the end of white. So this is how he's doing it. First of all, he plays bishop d4. The threat is rook f2 check. And if the king comes in this direction, then the white rook would be lost. And if the king goes on e1, then the bishop would be lost. So white is forced to do some passive move. In the game, he decided to play bishop to f3 because he thought that if he goes bishop rook f3 instead of that, then black can simply play f6. White's pieces are paralyzed, and next black has ways still to improve the king. For instance, he can bring it all the way to the queen's flank like that, maybe on d4 as well, and there is nothing that white can do to stop this. That's one idea. Another one is probably to come even on this side and to play for Zugzwang. But the one with the queen's flank seems better. So therefore, bishop to f3. And now king f6. The king is coming out. There are two routes for the king to get into the opponent's camp via e5 or via g5. Bishop e2. King is coming on g5. And black didn't care about the pawn on h7. In this endgames, just like in the bishop endgames, the number of the pawns is not that important. More important is the quality of the pieces. Now the combined efforts of the three black pieces are giving results. There wasn't basically a difference where this rook is going. If rook c7 instead of rook b7, then rook g1 would be the reply, and after king h2, rook e1 with a tempo. And it doesn't really matter if the bishop is defended or escapes. There will be the move king e3 followed by king f3. That square is taken by the king, and bishop e5 is unstoppable. Also note that the bishop is protecting the c3 square. So therefore, Tao decided to defend with rook b7. Now in a similar line, he might have a check on the third rank, but after check and rook e1, he couldn't see a way to save himself from the checkmate, because this time whenever the bishop goes away, after bishop f3, check would be answered king f2. The bishop is defending the second rank, and once again there is no escape against the checkmate on e5. Here is one more example of successful attack of the bishop and the rook. This is line from the game Bogolyubov against Alekhine from their match. Whenever you have the active pieces, whenever you have active bishop and rook, you're usually trying to attack on the color of the square of the bishop, so that you're completely excluding the opponent's bishop, and you're playing with an extra piece practically in the attack, and these attacks are very strong. This is how Bogolyubov does it. So e6 is the first move, and the threat is quite obvious, e7, and after that pawn will become a queen. Black is forced to take on e4, and now first check, driving the king away from the pawn. Then after the move rook c7, white is threatening to go e7, or then to go e7, and the pawn would be promoted, so black is forced to come back on f8, to which white replies with bishop c4, creating some additional threats and also protecting indirectly the pawn on h4. The threat is rook f7 check, followed by bishop b5 check, and this would be the case if black captures the pawn on h4. Just check on the light square, one more check on the light square, and one more check on the light square. The king is driven all the way to b8, and once that it is too far away, white is simply promoting the pawn. There is no escape against rook d8 check and e8 queen. After rook f7 check, if the king has gone to g8, then the simplest is e7 with the threat rook f8 check and e8 queen. There is nothing that black can do to stop this once again. Alright, the pawn on h4 is defended. But how about if black simply plays passively with king e8? He steps in front of the pawn and he waits. Now he wants to take the pawn. Here an important move for white is that one, h5. Not only that white is saving the pawn, He is also taking control over the vital g6 square, and there won't be an escape for that king. You will see now. Bishop h4 or bishop b6, the other line, to which there will be check, check on a light square as usual, and the bishop would be attacked with a tempo. Of course, black cannot take on e6 as there is bishop c4 pin. He is losing a whole rook. And if the bishop escapes on c5, then there will be a check. Once again, note that if the king goes on h7, there is a skewer, always on the light squares. So bishop f8 is more or less forced, but after the nice bishop c4, there is nothing that black can do to stop the move e7. He is completely paralyzed. He can even take the bishop, but this doesn't save him. e7 and e8 or e takes f8, the pawn is becoming a queen. So finally what we have is the move bishop h4, and then we already know the method. Check on light square, check this time on black square. Sometimes we have to give the checks also on black squares. It's quite unusual, and usually we're doing this when we're winning by force. Rook takes e7, check, only move king f7, check, and here we see the role of the modus pawn on h5. It has taken away the heir from the king, and black is losing the rook. Not the exchange, but the rook, because there is this check on the 7th rank, and the rook is gone for free. So these are the important things that you needed to know about this endgames. The chances for the stronger side are much higher, because he can combine the attack of the rook and the bishop at the weaknesses of the opponent. He can also use the Zugzwang ideas, and also sometimes he can use additional winning methods like the exchange sacrifice or the piece sacrifice. Thank you for your attention, and see you the next time.